Good evening, and welcome to the Daily Discourse. Tonight is very loosely on humility. It's a topic I think requires much more detail and attention, but I had a conversation a few moments ago, and this sort of came up, so I wanted to address it tonight. So as always, take this as you will. But it kind of ties into what the theme of this has been. So again, this is very much on the surface, and Lord willing, we'll come back to it in much more detail. But last night we spoke about Jonah and the whale. So to recap, just the highlights and only half the story. Right? God asks the prophet Jonah to do something, and Jonah instead runs away and far away, tries to escape, and he's running from what he's being called to do. And so when we look at it this way, right, Jonah's being called to do something. So he's either choosing to do the thing that he should do or the thing that he wants to do. And so he chooses to do what he wants, which is to run away, and he boards a boat heading to another shoreline. And there's a storm. Jonah's thrown overboard, swallowed by a whale. So now he's spending time, it was 3 days, 3 nights, in the belly of a fish, which seems dark, unpleasant, and we will come back to this momentarily. Because another story that kind of ties into this from discourses past was the story of the prodigal son. Again, just to recap the highlights, a young man asks his father for his share of the inheritance. He leaves, and he squanders his money on a life of pleasure-seeking and kind of jumping from one desire to another, presumably so. And then he hits this point of realization, right? He's destitute, he's wasted all the money, and he realizes that he needs to do something. He sees that he's working on a farm, he sees that the swine that he's tending to have more to eat than the servants at his father's. So he realizes, maybe I'll go back, ask for forgiveness, and ask my father to treat me like one of the servants there. And so he begins his journey back to his house. So in Jonah's situation and in the prodigal sons, right, there's this transformative moment of deep humility. It's a distinct turning away from pride. When we look at Jonah, it is choosing the path of the self and winding up in the belly of a fish. And so he turns in this darkness and in this sadness and in this desperation, he turns to humility and he says, I am sorry, and he goes on and he repents, and he ends up being vomited out of the fish's mouth. And the story continues from there, but irrelevant per se for this immediate conversation. So far as the prodigal son, right? He's destitute, he has nothing. He realizes he made a big mistake in the sense of following the course that he wanted to, and based on selfishness and selfish motives and arrogance. And he has to be humble to say, oh my goodness, I need to go back and I need to beg to be forgiven, and I need to ask at the most, right, that I will be accepted back as a servant. I don't want any more than that. And so both of these instances, right, are these intense moments of self-reflection and humility. So I mention most of this because, right, humility is this major component of us turning back towards God. It requires this letting go of our pride, thinking that we've got this, or we'll do it on our terms and things like that. And it requires a real sense of humility to turn back or to just turn that direction and realize, I need assistance. Now, this implies that the directive of our lives is such of wanting to be loving, honest, and sincere in every moment possible, right? This is the purpose of life. That's the big surprise, right? What's the point of life? The meaning of life is to be honest, loving, and sincere 100% of the time. And so the course of life is how we can make that happen, and in doing so, how God can make that happen through us. And in doing so, what is the most good that we can do for others, and then reflecting on our actions and whatnot. Again, different topic for a different time, but relevant for mentioning now. So what is this idea of humility, right? It is this quality that requires much more of a thought-out explanation. But the very basis of it is selflessness. When we are not acting of our own directive is when humility is there, because there is nothing, there's nothing else motivating us. And so it goes hand in hand with self-reflection. But the basis of humility then, as far as like a totally on the surface explanation, is acting in selflessness. So selflessness now, without self, in emptying of ourselves. And so love exists in this emptiness because love is emptiness. You see, because pure and true love has no attachments to it. It just gives and pours out and doesn't think twice about it. It has no judgments. It has no preconceived notions. It has no opinions. It just pours out. I mean, there can't be any hidden agendas with it or anything behind it. And so because this pure love is unattached to anything, and it has to be void of the self. So the self cannot be involved in this. And so it must be, again, to reiterate, selfless. And so all of these selfless qualities, compassion and kindness and everything that goes along with that, right, they all follow in that wake, that they can't be attached to the ideas of the self. And so humility then is naturally built into this, again, very much on the surface, and is so much as like a visual, an action-based visual of humility. The idea of it is putting others before ourselves. So if you imagine a line of people, right, and everybody's trying to get here, let's just say for the sake of the visual, right, and so here's the line. And so if we look at humility in this way, humility is walking up to the line and immediately going to the end of the line, to put others before us, literally speaking. And in doing so, we're able to develop a deeper gratitude and appreciation for all things, right? Having no expectations, having no preconceived notions of things, and we're always able then to find the beauty and the simplicity of the situation. And so if we're walking towards the back of the line in this humble action, and God says, no, wait a second, come over here, your place is here in line. It's, oh my goodness, what a blessing this is, and to really feel that gratitude for it. And instead, right, on the opposite side of this, if we are pushing and shoving, because everybody's trying to get to the front, so if we're in that mix of pushing and shoving and God says, no, wait a second, come over here, your place is here in line, there's this anger and resentment and wanting to still kind of follow our own wills, and it becomes this unpleasant situation of, this isn't where I thought I'd be, and what have you. So trying to put others first always. And then when we are moved in other places, it's with this sense of gratitude and, again, more humility in our hearts. So to tie this in then to Jonah, more specifically, also in the prodigal son, but more specifically Jonah, he's in this, right, proverbial belly of the whale, like a habit of self-reflection. It doesn't take much of that to know that when a quality that we see or feel doesn't sit right, it's quick to see that it's because it's coming from a selfish place, forgive me. And so it is, in a sense, like that belly of the whale, and it requires our asking to be forgiven of that. It might seem very simple and very insignificant, but the more that we can recognize it, the more that we can understand it and eventually let go of it. So there is that like dissatisfaction inside, or in acting selfishly. If we achieve a satisfaction, right? Let's say trying to impress somebody to satisfy this desire inside of myself that might even be more deeply rooted in this desire of lust, right? But right now it's pride, arrogance, and maybe in the background is lust. And so if that's my motive, right, I treat this situation in a certain way and it's handled in a certain way. And the satisfaction that I get from these small victories, per se, in line with this, they're very fleeting. And it's often, right, this victory and then like a steep fall. And, the higher I think I'm jumping, the more of a fall I feel. So the more that I have to move and move and move on this thing until we finally get that thing that maybe we wanted, which might be based in lust or pride or otherwise. And we realize that there was nothing there. And so then it's on to the next desire and so forth and so on. And we leave behind us this wake of just hurt that we cause other people and also ourselves. And so when we hit these low points, it's almost like that belly of the fish. And so we are forced to choose to either continue on in this pattern or to turn back to God. And so if we look at God, right, if using the G word is uncomfortable, if we look at God as the essence of love, selfless love, as the essence of these divine qualities, right, we have to let go of ourselves to turn back to that, like the prodigal son, to begin that journey back to the Father, back to this divine beauty that we all innately know. We all innately know this, which is why it's easy to tell when you're off inside. And so just a little self-reflection can help you kind of understand what the root of those things are. Maybe not the very, very bottom of it, but at least to be able to kind of follow it back to the idea of the self and selfish qualities. And this is not a fun process. Nobody likes to realize that, they're sad because they're not feeling valuable in the life or something like that, or that they're angry because they feel like some injustice has been done to them. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place for that, but maybe that we need to check what our foundation is, right? Well, we'll talk about social injustice another time because I like to try and keep these about 15 minutes so it's more digestible, and it also keeps me from going on larger tangents. So I think that's a good place to end now, is just this idea of humility and putting others first and finding that there is a great value in that, even though it goes against what culture teaches us. It goes against what society teaches us, but worth examining and worth examining ourselves and trying to understand all of that. So forgive me if that was a little jumbled. Like I said, this question just came up just prior to starting this, and I felt the need to address it immediately. Not so dramatic, but so we'll pick up again Monday because I'll take Sundays off, and I look forward to it. So 7 p.m. Eastern Time Monday. Again, if you have any questions or anything you'd like me to address or clarify, don't hesitate to reach out. As always, God bless, and I look forward to doing this again. And please, again, know I speak from humility. I don't want to make anybody feel bad about certain things in their lives, but that turning to God is so crucial and so important. So I wouldn't discourage a little bit of self-reflection just to see where that lines us up. And I look forward to Monday. Thanks again.